All right, this is English 101, Week 5, Part 10. We're almost done. We're doing pretty good here. Okay, so um, Socrates says that the soul which has never seen the truth will not pass into the human form, for a man must have intelligence of universals and be able to proceed from the many particulars of sense to one conception of reason. This is the recollection of those things which our soul saw once while following God. So he says the point is that he says that you have to have seen some of the beauty, truth, and goodness. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a human being. That's an interesting thing. He claims that it's like he's defining a human being as having some connection to understanding beauty, truth, and goodness. That even the tyrant only got to see a little beauty, truth, and goodness, but it was enough that it made him a person. If the soul of the tyrant had seen less than that, he would be an animal and not Hitler. It's a definition of a person that human beings, Socrates says, have some connection to this world of beauty, truth, and goodness. They are capable, even if just a little bit, of thinking about higher heavenly things like beauty, truth, and goodness. He says universals. Those are things that are always true in all times and all places. Um, okay, so I'm coming around to the thing again. Okay. Uh, yeah, I think that's really interesting. I really like it's an idea about what a human being is. That it's a person who has seen or is capable of seeing these larger philosophical truths. It's kind of lovely because it's an idea that anybody can do this. It's not Socrates isn't like some people are slaves and they'll always be animals basically and they can't, this is the kind of racist stuff that people said in like American history about American slaves, that they were animals and couldn't feel pain. But Socrates has this idea that if you're a human being, you can think about and experience these larger ideas are open to you. And when he says these larger ideas, I really want the thing is, there's very little I can say to you that will be true for all my students. But one thing all my students have in common is they're all in college. And if you're in college, then you're being exposed to professors. And these professors are trying to get you to think about large philosophical issues. So you're all in your classes. And again, I know some of them are something like accounting class might just be numbers, but even math is sort of a large universal truth that's always true. So some of these things may seem silly, but your professors are trying to get you to think about sort of larger philosophical stuff. Okay, let's take a look at what Socrates says here. Okay. And therefore the mind of the philosopher alone has wings. And this is just, for he is always, according to the measure of his abilities, clinging to recollections of those things in which God abides, and beholding and in beholding which he is what he is. So the idea that the philosopher is the one who has the biggest wings, that's closest to God and thinking about this stuff. And he who employs aright these memories is in ever being initiated into perfect mysteries, the mysteries of the universe, and alone he becomes truly perfect. But as he forgets earthly interests and is wrapped in the divine, the vulgar deem him mad and rebuke him. They do not see that he is inspired. This right here, I can't point to it. This right here is important. He who employs aright these memories is ever being initiated into perfect mysteries. And when he says memories there, he means memories of those higher heavenly things like goodness, truth, and beauty. Is ever being initiated into perfect mysteries and alone becomes truly perfect. But as he forgets earthly interests and is wrapped in the divine, the vulgar, meaning everyday people, deem him, call him mad, crazy, and rebuke him. They make fun of him. They do not see that he is inspired. This is a major point. Very big Socrates point, worth spending some time on. He says that philosophers spend their time thinking about goodness, truth, and beauty, these kinds of bigger, higher, heavenly things. And one of the things they do this is they think about higher heavenly things and they ignore earthly, everyday things. And that regular, everyday people think they're crazy because they ignore stuff that most human beings care about. People make fun of them, and they think that these philosophers are crazy to be spending time on this stupid shit when they should be concerned about more earthly, serious things. This is something that comes up a lot in my students' lives. Many of my students want to major in art. They want to major in theater. They want to major in painting. They want to be poets. And their families think that's crazy for them to be thinking about art when they should be thinking about money and being practical. This is a big issue in a community college where a lot of times the students are the first in their families to go to college, and the emphasis is on practical stuff like how to get a job. But I think it's worth pointing out that Socrates says, even back in ancient Greece, philosophers who spent time thinking about philosophy were made fun of by people for being crazy. I mean, a lot of students think I'm crazy because I spend all day long reading giant books and thinking about Shakespeare and thinking about Plato, thinking about art. And people think I'm nuts. My other professors at BMCC have made fun of me for carrying around. I carry a book around everywhere I go. I'm constantly reading books, and I carried this big Shakespeare book. And one of my more than one professor saw me with this book, and they said, "Oh, are you teaching that play this semester?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Are you writing an article on it or something for publication so you can get a promotion?" I was like, "No." They were like, "Why are you reading it?" I was like, "I don't know. I like Shakespeare. I like reading poetry. I think it's fun." Socrates, I think it's interesting that Socrates points out, even all those years ago, that people thought philosophers were crazy for avoiding earthly things and thinking about higher heavenly things. But it's the same thing a lot of the students do, and parents, because the students want to, again, if you're interested in art, painting, and theater, you're talking about beauty. You're going to major in philosophy, you're thinking about truth. You're going to study ethics for a living. You're thinking about, or even religion, you're thinking about goodness. And people are like, how are you going to make money doing that? That's crazy. But I think there's something kind of beautiful about it, actually. That the same thing that affects ancient Greece was also still around today. And remember, people think the philosopher is crazy. This connects back to Socrates' point, and we're going to get to this soon, about love. And how people think people in love are crazy. Remember, because in Unit 1, Socrates was saying, hey, love makes you crazy, and that's bad for the following reasons. But then in this new speech, Socrates is saying, actually, craziness is good. There are good things about being crazy. For example, the philosopher cares about beauty, truth, and goodness, or the artist cares about beauty, truth, and goodness. Majoring in theater, majoring in art, majoring in poetry, majoring in philosophy. You're talking about big philosophical things, but lots of people will tell you you are crazy for doing that stuff. Remember, Socrates' point is that there's a good kind of crazy, and that this is actually the good kind of crazy. Okay. So Socrates says, thus far, I have been speaking of the fourth and last kind of madness, which is imputed to him who, when he sees the beauty of the earth, is transported with a recollection of true beauty. Okay. This is one of Socrates' most important points. He's talking about being in love and how being in love makes you crazy. He's defining the craziness in an interesting way. Socrates says that when you fall in love, you see beauty. Right? You fall in love with somebody, you're like, this person's so good looking, they're so beautiful. But what you're really experiencing, and you think, what you're really experiencing is the recollection of true beauty. Meaning, when you see a beautiful person, the reason you like them is because, Socrates says, you are reminded of the true heavenly beauty that you saw. And that's what love is. It's not about that individual person. It's about the higher heavenly things that person reminds you of, the true beauty that your soul and the good horse knows exists in some higher heavenly area. And that's why he says, and people will call you crazy, but he says the reason why they're calling you crazy is because you're almost being transported away from this world into thinking of a higher heavenly world like the philosophers think of. That is Socrates' huge Socrates point. I'll see you guys in the next video.